Hey legends, welcome along to the show. Now, I have been, as a creator, trying to make stuff, write your own content, put out YouTube videos, record podcasts and whatnot. You tend to put a lot of stuff onto your watch list when it comes to the like of YouTube and that sort of thing, and you very rarely get around to watching it. Now, that has been a big problem for me for 10 years now at this point. Like, my to watch list on all streaming services is flipping huge, and there's so many things I want to get into, and this is more of a thing that I should be talking about on the horror podcast. If you don't know about that, I actually have a little podcast called Hellmouth Hotline. Started out as like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast, but all things horror. I'm sort of skipping between that, the Hammer House of Horror, Hammer movies, all that sort of stuff. Freddy Krueger, we're getting into in a big way over there at the moment. This is something that really should be over there, but yes, I just fancied talking about it on this channel and give you a heads up with the podcast. Obviously, The Haunting of Hill House 2018 has been on my watch list since day one, and I literally only get around to checking it out this week. This show is actually flipping amazing. I couldn't get over it. Horror normally isn't really my thing. It's not the thing I would jump towards straight away. If I get up in the morning, like I fancy watching a show or a movie, chances are a horror will not be the sort of thing I'll put on. But this is a little horror show on Netflix right now. I would highly recommend you checking it out. I just want to bring up some of the the character names here, because the acting within this show is absolutely fantastic. Essentially, this show takes place in, and I don't want to get into really detailed stuff here because there's a heck of a lot of stuff going on in this show. It's set pretty much within a 2 or 3 day period in the life of this fractured family that had bought Hill House with the intention of doing it up, restoring it, and then selling it on and making a profit on it. But supernatural happenings occur, and the family are forced to leave, and the mother of the family dies in the house the night they leave. Even though the entire story takes place within this 2 or 3 day stretch, it jumps back and forth between present day and history. Like, a lot of the family were still children when they originally left the house. We, in modern day, pick up with them, they're all grown up. It's like 20 years down the line from the events that drove them from the house in the first place, and they're all in some way, shape or form been tormented by, let's just say, ghosts of the past at this point. But there is a supernatural presence in the house. They're still connected to it, and it's interesting for a story that takes place within a 2 or 3 day stretch. The amount of information that you're going to get through the 10 episodes, they are constantly jumping backwards and forwards in time, as far as like flashbacks showing the family originally coming to the house, everything that happened to them during the time they were there, to the left, to the implications of everything that happened to them in their present day. There's a lot of mental health in here. There's a few things that I don't really want to touch on, just because of the content for YouTube these days. There's some elements of the show that I don't think will go down too well in the current structure of the algorithm, but basically things go from bad to worse for a few of the characters in the show as the story unfolds, and the influence of Hill House after all these years starts to reach out and pull family members back. There's a presence in the house, and the father of the family actually says in episode 9, I believe, that the house considers the family an unfinished meal that it wants to get its hands on. The characters in it are fantastic. Like you've the main cast of characters, as far as the family goes, there's two different versions of actors bar the mother. You've got the past, the children version of them, then there's the present day grown up version of them. So the casting is absolutely fantastic. It is it's directed by Mike Flanagan, and his work, though it's been on this playlist for quite a while now, I am literally only really getting into it now. Apparently he is the go-to guy right now for horror, Netflix horror. It's written by Mike Flanagan, created by Mike Flanagan. He's behind everything here. Like, I'm just going through some of the credits here, and it's just Mike Flanagan is all over it, as far as the creator, the director, the writer. Based on the novel by Shirley Jackson. Yes, it's a fantastic series. Now, I would actually say, going into it, it's a slow burn, and from what I've been hearing about the Mike Flanagan stuff on Netflix at the moment, this is true across the board, getting into the shows. Obviously, I've just started The Haunting of Bly Manor right now. He's behind that as well, and yes, something in the back of my head wants to say he's behind Midnight Mass as well. I could be wrong on that. Let me just check that before we get any further into this. Midnight Mass. Like, I know there's a few of the same actors that's in there, and yes, directed by Mike Flanagan. So this guy is doing some tasty stuff right now as far as the haunting shows, the ghost stories, and Netflix. And The Haunting of Hill House is a classic ghost story, and it's a classic styled ghost story, I should say, and one that was, I don't freak out that much. I do tend to get over emotional watching stuff. For example, literally Ghostbusters Afterlife the other evening there, or watching that last 10 minutes of movie, almost crying like a child. And this, even though it's a slow start, give it the first 2 episodes, let them get past you, because it kind of takes the first handful of episodes, and it's more or less a character journey on each of these episodes. You have a different character from the family. You get their backstory, where they're at, what they're doing, how they've been affected by everything. So throughout the first handful of episodes, you kind of get the same time period from different perspectives, and it is a little bit, well, not a little bit, it's literally a slow burn. But when this thing kicks off, gets the momentum going, it's brilliant. It's not overly graphic, it's not overly scary, but it has a good way of, it's got a few good timed, good placed jump scares that caught me a few times during the series. I'm usually a few steps ahead of these shows, but genuinely a couple of jump scares there that got me. But it's got an unsettling side to it as well, and the way that it scares you, because it's one of these things that it'll scare you slightly in the moment, but it's got a style, well, for me anyway, watching it, it had a way of implanting something in your head that wouldn't exactly freak you out at the time, but later on that night or the next day, you'll get over this thing in your head, and it'll really start to churn into you then. It's the unsettling side of it is unbelievably well done. Now, when you get to episode 5, I want to say, let me just get a look at the episode names here. episode 5, even episode 4 leads well into episode 5. There's a character in here that special reference to this girl, Victoria Pedretti, and she's actually the main character in the Haunting of Bly Manor. At the moment, she plays Nell Crane in the Haunting of Hill House. You know exactly the story arc of her character from episode 1. She is the first victim of Hill House. It opens up the series on her death, how she dies, and it takes up the episode 4 leading into episode 5. Do you actually get into the bulk of her story, her how she got to where she is, what happens to her, and by the time you get there, you're not just step for step with the story, you're kind of, I don't know, this is a bit of a spoiler, but it kind of lulls you into not a false sense of security. You know, when you're going through this episode 5 is incredibly well written. She acts it amazingly. When it gets to the point of, you know, you're catching up with her in her final hours, essentially, and when we get to that point, you know exactly what's going to happen or where she's going to end up at, and you're kind of waiting for it to happen. But when she gets into Hill House for the first time in probably 20 years at this point, what happens in the house is surprising, to be fair, and the way her death happens in this episode is, it's a shock. It's fairly graphically done, but as I say, you know what's going to happen. You're there step for step. But what happens to her in the house, from she gets in the door to where she's at, where she dies at, everything happens in between that, is, it's heartbreaking. And that character, you are so much on her side. Like, if you do not drop a tear for this character in the final sequence of this episode, you're dead on the inside. And when it happens, even though you know it happens, you know what's going to happen, there's something a little bit extra that happens in there that you're kind of like, I didn't see that coming. That's interesting. And it's one of the things that kind of played with me for a few days. But the series, I know, on the whole, is actually really well done, really well written, really well acted. It looks beautiful. It's amazingly well put together. I have had quite a few late nights this week just keeping up with this series. As I say, wanted to see Ghostbusters Afterlife this week as well, so I had to get this out of the way before that. So you know, I was just burning the candle at both ends as far as actually working and checking out shows. I couldn't recommend this higher. Definitely, if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. If, like me, you've got it sitting on the back of your Netflix to watch list, get into it as soon as you can. It's not going to be a waste of your time whatsoever. But yes, again, give it that first couple of episodes to let it warm up and get going. I actually, in all fairness, I did try to start this show about 6 months ago. I watched the first episode of it, and it was slow enough to the point where I was like, yeah, I could kind of leave it. And I did for quite a few months. But I just got into it in the off chance one night. I was like, I have to go and check this out again. And pretty glad I did. That's a pretty damn good show.